The following is designed to explain that the universe, this planet and your life is a gift from God, not a commodity to be controlled for profit by elitists, who assume they are more enlightened than you. Everything in the universe adheres to order, whether we're talking about the alignment of galaxies, rotation and travel of planetary bodies or the physics which govern them. Order is a good thing despite chaos, and chaos is things and situations which we are unable to control or predict, being a built-in component of order. Manipulation within any ordered structure is natural for all sentient beings. We humans seem to be designed specifically to push boundaries. Our mere presence affects the balance of everything around us throughout our lives and beyond. We are therefore subject to one another, whether we are conscious of the fact or not, and whether we like it or not. When we interact we control and manipulate. Everything in nature is driven by self-interest. Even benevolence is selfish. We are nice to people, because it makes us feel good to make others happy. Those in control of resources are the masters, the rest are slaves. The natural inclination of all living things tends toward freedom and liberty. Order and control impinge on the prospect of freedom and liberty. Since we are all subject to the will of the masters, the choices are simple: either we kill everything and everyone standing in the way of our personal freedom and liberty, or we yield a portion of our freedom and liberty in compromise to the masters and each other. This is an attempt at balance. Because we are self-centered, egotistical individuals with love issues, perfect balance is impossible to achieve. Coming close to some working semblance of balance seems much more doable. Perfect balance is only possible if we're God, or as enlightened, ascended beings in tune with our Creator. In the physical we strive to achieve a working semblance of balance and harmony, which does not require perfection. Harmony, or symbiosis, is possible to achieve between both master and slave as well as every coexisting thing in nature. Peace is a crucial element of harmony. We should not expect to achieve harmony by forcibly manipulating others. Where two or more divergent wills are pitted against one another, harmony is an elusive thing. Harmony is found only where two or more have agreed to yield to one another's desire, to be in control of an environment. In order to control the balance of harmony we must be willing to compromise our selfish interests, in order to meet at a mutually acceptable place on the field of each other's range of tolerance. Force and violence are hallmarks of the control freak. Harmony requires an understanding that we are coexistent, equally loved, uniquely created children of the same God. In order to build a loving, symbiotic society, let's start there. Throughout our lives we have been exposed to ordered systems designed by control freaks, who want us behaving in ways they deem appropriate. We have been indoctrinated by institutions of education, as well as television, so that we become predisposed to react to life in ways the control freak gatekeepers to our access to information consider manageable. We are told by our masters that we should feel good, because our tomorrows will be better than our yesterdays, as long as we believe in the brilliance of some luminaries' inspired visions and definitions of what happiness and prosperity are. What if we don't want what they're selling? This is where things get a bit dicey, because governments and religions are quite similar in their intolerance of opposition. The various religions compete with one another in an attempt to manipulate and control the masses, ostensibly to honor God in ways deemed acceptable by the proprietors of a given religious sect. Most religions believe in the notion that peace is worthwhile and godly, which it is. However, there is an opposite end to that spectrum, which is also of God. Because swimming against the tide is harder than swimming with it, we tend to go along to get along. After all, it seems to work out okay for the next fellow. Once people have glommed onto an idea that works, the idea of changing is usually met with resistance, and that is why although change is the only universal constant, it comes slowly. The trouble with God is our interpretation of God. Because we physical human beings have a limited capacity to understand that which is spiritual or metaphysical, we end up disagreeing with each other regularly. This dilemma often gives rise to war, or at the very least the snubbing of those deemed inferior, because they don't believe as we do. These actions are a contradiction to the precepts of peace espoused by the various religions. The trouble with religion is that religion requires conformity to standards, which distinctly set the various groups of believers apart, thus controlling the people within the religious sect. Some say you can't cut your hair, while another says you need a dipping in water, while another says you must not modernize, etc. All attempts at finding a perfect religion have failed miserably, because all of them control and manipulate people in direct contradiction to God, since God created each of us uniquely, giving us free will to choose for ourselves whichever path we should travel at any given moment. If God was a control freak, then God would not have created us as individuals, but rather as pre-programmed God-loving robots. If you're looking for freedom and liberty, you'll never find it following a religion, or by forcing others to follow a religion. God isn't religious, God doesn't need to be. This isn't to suggest that religion itself is bad, the same way a gun isn't bad, it's an object. The good or bad moniker is ascribed when somebody uses the gun for a particular purpose, whether defending life or taking life, or putting food on the table. The best we can ever hope for is a government flexible and tolerant enough to accommodate and unify diverse groups of people under a set of basic principles, which limits individual freedom and liberty only when absolutely necessary to satisfy its charter mandates. The only control any government should be allowed to exercise should arise from the need to defend its citizenry, not the altruistic cradle-to-grave regulation of every single aspect of our lives. It is better to lose a few lives as a byproduct of freedom and liberty than forcing people to behave in ways that limit or control them unnecessarily. There will always be people who are willing to risk their lives in the pursuit of happiness. That does not give anyone the right to forcibly prevent such people from doing as they wish, unless their actions negatively affect our freedom, liberty or happiness. If someone is using a gadget while driving, not wearing a seatbelt or helmet, these are choices and are extensions of the cosmic law of free will. Although occasionally someone acting in his or her own self-interest causes the death of another, still, it is better to accept such tragedy and appropriately grieve the loss, using the incident as a teachable lesson than give up our liberty over it. We shouldn't give away our liberty just because random bad things might otherwise happen. Bad, even tragic things are a part of life. Even if we were individually bubble-wrapped and completely insulated from impact, our stifled emotions can make living so undesirable people will die anyway. Death happens. Earth is a free will zone. The fact that randomly anyone may die at any moment for any number of reasons should be enough to remind us to treat each other more pleasantly than is the norm on this planet. Rudeness stems from a superiority or inferiority complex. Some feel that others are beneath them, some are upset because they feel belittled. God created each of us uniquely, and each life is therefore uniquely precious. We deserve freedom and joy. You have never known absolute freedom. Freedom is autonomy, and plebes are to be trusted, must be governed, must be controlled and kept in an orderly environment. So goes the thinking of the masters on planet Earth. What you know of joy is therefore proportional to your willingness to overlook the fact that you are continually manipulated and controlled. Human beings have never been trusted by other human beings to look after themselves. Even breaking free of British rule was no free-for-all for Americans. This episode in history was a chance at utopia, but alas, the control freaks could never put up with autonomous citizens, and America, like everywhere else, became yet another structured, ordered environment ruled by the masters. The logical extension of masters ruling plebes is that, even if great ideas come along which would make their lives better, little of this sort of thing will be permitted, if it means the masters would socio-economically lose their control over plebes. Exceptions to this are rare, and happen only when necessary to prevent anarchy. The masters offer a gadget here, a minor improvement there, all the while calculating how to profiteer in the most efficient way once the item or improvement is brought forth. Despite increased efficiency, no improvements ever resulted in cheaper bills, such as internet, phone or utilities. The only time prices drop is when masters compete like vultures for the plebes' money. The more financially impoverished you are, the harder it is to economically tread water. If your credit score is deemed less than desirable, there are amazingly high interest rates levied against every dollar you are encouraged to borrow. This vicious cycle is designed to keep the slaves broke and beholden to the masters. This is not how God's children deserve to be treated. Until people begin to consider a basic truth, that the slaves vastly outnumber the masters, not much will ever change where control is concerned, especially since the masters have the most efficient weapons, and limit the slave's ability to defend him or herself from tyranny. Sticking up for one's freedom and liberty can mean death in the extreme. Sometimes death is worth the sacrifice, especially when the alternative is intolerable. People gravitate toward freedom and liberty, and many would rather die fighting for happiness than allow masters to limit them, control them and mistreat them. This is how the human condition balances itself. Human beings want the best gadgets at reasonable prices, and don't appreciate being controlled financially or otherwise. We enjoy having the time to spend with family and friends. We love to invent, and would rather work for an honest wage, than have to work like slaves, just to economically stay afloat. We are eager to learn if challenged, and not pressured because we are naturally curious beings. Why on earth does knowledge cost money, and why do we put up with this system? It seems that the more we allow others to control us, the unhappier we tend to become. The question then becomes, what would life be like if we had individual autonomy? Answer: we would be forced to respect each other or die. What would autonomous life be like? People would still form interest groups, which would eventually become powerful by virtue of that which they know, produce or control, tending to create a dual society of masters and slaves. Life on Earth, without the ability for people to manifest for themselves that which they need and desire, will always be this way. If we could create, or manifest out of thin air all that we need and desire, as if we were the creator, we might then have a shot at a world where individual autonomy becomes plausible, even likely. If we could somehow acquire the power to act as gods, would we be nicer? Would we seek to venture beyond our planet in order to dominate others? I'm sure some would, once boredom set in. It is impossible for a human being to ever be content. Although humans can exhibit a degree of self-control, we, like everything else including Prime Creator, will always succumb to the one undeniably persistent motivational constant: the need for change.